Welcome to Safety Training for the School of Biological Sciences, Fall of 2015. You have the right to know about hazards that are in your workplace. It's an OSHA regulation. It's called the Hazard Communication Standard, and sometimes known as the right to know. What we've developed here in this presentation is some information that will help you understand the hazards that are in your workplace, be that in the teaching labs or be that in a research lab. Over the summer, we developed a chemical hygiene plan. It's a comprehensive document. It's available in all teaching labs and in all research labs. So check with your PI or your instructor of where this is available in your environment. Please read the document. It contains lots of very useful information. We've also collected the safety data sheets and created an electronic database of chemicals. For the prep room and for all teaching labs, these are available MSDS online, and in each research lab, the PI has developed their own documentation system. So again, check with the PI if you're working in a research lab. We've also formally adopted the HMIS, or the Hazardous Materials Identification System, which goes along with the NFPA, or the National Fire Protection Association's 704 system. I'll talk more about what that means in just a little bit. Finally, in each research lab now, there will be standard operating procedures, how to handle hazards, specific hazards that are involved in processes within a particular lab. Check with your research PI to find out where these SOPs or standard operating procedures are in your research environment. It's important that we all realize that safety and identifying hazards is the responsibility of everyone in a research environment, be that in a classroom or be that in a research lab. The ultimate information or the ultimate responsibility does lie with the school director. What I have given you here is emergency contact information. So my information as a school director is on here, as is the campus emergency number. If you pick up any phone, any hardwired phone within the Ross Hall, you will get directly and dial 911. You will get the campus police. If it's a non-emergency, the non-emergency number for campus police is also listed. Other information here: the school has a chemical hygiene officer, which is Mark Thomas. A chemical stock room, which is Frank Skufka. He manages that. And environmental health and safety, Glenn Adams is the director of this program for the university. So if you have any questions about safety, the first person you should talk to is the PI of your lab or the instructor associated with the teaching lab that you're involved with. If they do not have the answer to your question, you can then move on to the safety committee, and the members of which are listed here. Mark Thomas, as I mentioned, is the chair of that committee. So what kind of information is in the chemical hygiene plan? Well, general safety information. There's a lot of information about how to be safe within the lab environment. There's also information about personal protective equipment, or PPE, laboratory biosafety, safety data sheets, what happens if you spill something, what happens if there's an accident within the environment. So take a look through the chemical hygiene plan. One thing to note, that the school does have a fair amount of fairly expensive equipment, and in order to use that equipment, you do need to receive prior training, and details of how to do this are laid out in the chemical hygiene plan. The chemical hygiene plan, as I mentioned, is in all teaching labs, should be available in all research labs, also available on the school's website, and the information is given here, along with a QR code, which will enable you to go directly to that link from a mobile phone. Safety data sheets. These used to be called MSDS, or Material Safety Data Sheets. They're now simply called SDS, or Safety Data Sheets. They have 16 sections, and each section is providing specific information. And the 16 sections are listed here on this slide. A couple of the sections that I think are important for this conversation would be hazards identification, or section number 2, and then section number 8, which is exposure controls and personal protection. So this is the section where you would find out what PPE or personal protection equipment you should be wearing when handling specific chemicals. Again, all of the SDS sheets are located on MSDS Online for all teaching labs and for the prep room. And each PI will have their own SDS location, and you need to check with the PI for your research lab for where this is. Again, this QR code will take you directly to the MSDS Online for all of the school, information about all chemicals stored within the school. So this is an example of a safety data sheet, and it has a lot of information associated with it. I won't go through each section, but it does give you an idea of what you're looking at. So let's talk hazards. So we're required to let you know what hazards are available in the workplace, what hazards are in your workplace. So we have the HMIS, or the Hazard Materials Identification System, and the NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection Association system. So we're using NFPA on the doors, and NFPA and the HMIS system really go hand in hand. So the system uses blue for health, red for flammability, and yellow for chemical reactivity, and each one has a rating. It goes from 0, which is minimal, to 4, which is extreme. So on the door, or close to the door to any research lab, you'll see an NFPA rating diamond, and you'll be able to then know what is the most highest level of hazard that is contained within this environment. What we'll find with the HMIS system is that individual chemicals will then have a hazard associated with them. Again, blue for health, red for flammability, yellow for chemical reactivity. If there is any special hazard, such as the compound or is corrosive or acidic, you'll see that information in the white part of the diamond. Associated with the HMIS system is a code for which personal protective equipment is identified. So if you can see here, this is a shortened version of the protection index, but A would suggest that you would need goggles, B would suggest that you would need goggles and gloves, and so on. Each individual container coming from a manufacturer will give you information about the personal protective equipment. And also, as I mentioned previously, this can be found on the SDS forms for any individual compound. So you'll notice as you go into labs, if you haven't been around this summer, that each secondary chemical now has a labeling associated with it. Again, the same HMIS system. So blue for health, red for flammability, yellow for reactivity, etc. So all secondary labels are required on all containers that will be used longer than a single working day. So what's required? The name of the chemical in English, common names and/or abbreviations, concentrations of various components, the solvent for solutions, the date that you or somebody else created the chemical, and whoever created the chemical, their initials. A couple of caveats that you can talk about with your PI. If you have a whole rack and all the tubes in that rack contain the same solution, you can label the rack and the potential hazards. Other options would be that if you in the lab use a particular abbreviation, if this abbreviation is posted somewhere within the lab environment, you can use that. But again, keep in mind that hazards ratings are 0, which is minimal hazard, to 4, which is an extreme hazard. Labeling hazardous waste. So hazardous waste containers need to be labeled as soon as they're initiated. They need to have the name of the chemical components in the waste, the percentage of each chemical in the mix, the date that the collection first began, and whoever initiated, we need their initials on that as well. Please make sure that all hazardous waste is labeled, and all hazardous waste must be contained within a container with a lid. When this container is full or no additional waste is to be added, please contact Frank Skufka for a hazardous waste material safety waste tag, and an example of that is provided on this slide for you. Okay, so I've talked about safety data sheets, and I've talked about the systems that we're using within the school, the HMIS and the NFPA systems. But I want to also let you know that there's an additional system a globally harmonized system for safety data information, which is also known as the GHS system. This is a system that OSHA is moving towards and will be required by summer of 2016, I believe. It's also the system that's used essentially by the rest of the world other than the United States. And you can see here that there are hazard classifications in health, environmental, physical. And so, for example, this is a flammable liquid, category 2, and has a couple of acute toxicity, category 4s. You'll be able to pick out a GHS label because they use pictograms, and we'll talk a little bit more about pictograms in a minute. And they also use danger words, so either a warning or a danger, depending on how what the signal word is associated. Here's some examples. You'll see these coming on shipping containers. They will be on some chemicals within your environment already, and they'll be on all newer SDS sheets. And so examples here, health hazard could be a carcinogen. It could have skin irritation. If it's corrosive, it could be explosive. So you get the idea. So why does it matter? We're not using the globally harmonized system, at least not for the next year. Well, it matters because you'll receive compounds and chemicals in the environment that are labeled this way. And of course, the HMIS system and the globally harmonized system are actually opposite of each other. So you'll see that they both have numbering systems. The HMIS, we talked about 0 is a minimal hazard and 4 is a severe hazard. And you'll see that in the GHS system that 1 is a severe hazard and 5 is a minimal hazard. So if something is a flammability of 2, that's pretty serious. If something in the GHS system, but it's only really a moderate hazard in the HMIS system. So again, be aware that we're using the NFPA system on the doors. So all the diamonds on the doors are NFPA. Within the labs, we're using the HMIS system, but information will come in that's the GHS system. So how can you tell? Look for those pictograms that we talked about just a slide or two ago. So keep this in mind. It's very important that you know the differences. So why are we still using the NFPA system if everyone else is moving towards the globally harmonized system? Well, NFPA is required by the Greeley Fire Department to be on the doors. And so because of the differences between the NFPA and the GHS, we've decided to maintain internal safety information in the HMIS because that's in line with the NFPA. Okay, so first aid. So what do you do if you're exposed to a hazard? Well, first of all, you need to consult the SDS for hazard information. Know what it is that you've been exposed to. If appropriate, we have eye washes and we have safety showers within the each lab environment. If you get something in your eyes, you need to wash with water for a minimum of 15 minutes. If you get something on your skin, again, you need to wash with water for a minimum of 15 minutes. Inhalation, move outside to fresh air. Ingestion, get emergency medical assistance. Please note that seek a medical attention immediately or after first aid intervention if appropriate. If something happens in the lab, we need to know about it. So please make sure that you complete a chemical, an accident report, details of which are available in the chemical hygiene plan. And it's important to know the location at the nearest eye wash and shower to your work area. If you have a chemical spill, again, there's a lot of information about this in the chemical hygiene plan, but just as a brief indication, there are spill kits available. So each prep room's associated with labs, and the information is given here. Spill kits can be found in these particular locations. Ross 1650, 1621, 1360, 2360, 2551, and also in the head house down by the greenhouse in 0402. So you can contain the spill if possible. If it's an acid or a base, these spill kits will help you do that. Call for assistance. Call your lab PI. All the information for the lab PI's contact information is now within each research lab. If you're in a classroom, call your TA, the graduate TA, or find the instructor. If you cannot locate those people, call the chemical hygiene officer. Again, Mark Thomas, and his number is here, or the lab manager, Frank Skufka, and his information is also on here. If the spill is too big, or you don't know what is spilled, or it's particularly noxious, then contact the campus police. Again, the non-emergency number is listed here, or pick up any of the hardwired phones within the school, and you can dial 911. Secure the site, put notices on so other people don't enter the environment, and then evacuate the area as needed. We actually had a spill late this summer, and bringing the police in also brought in the environmental health and safety, and so there was a lot of people who could decide how best to determine what was spilled and how best to clean that up. Okay, so the final piece of information that I wanted to give you is where do you go in the case of severe weather or fire evacuation. So we have a campus-wide emergency system, an emergency alert system, which can be activated. You can have your cell phone information. You can give your cell phone information to the emergency alert system, and so you'll get a call and or a text if something is going on. In the case of severe weather, so let's think about a tornado. In this case, don't leave the building. You want to move to an interior hallway on the first floor of Ross. The 1500 hallway, which is the faculty office hallway on the first floor of Ross, is one place to go, and it's a place that is highly suggested. The reason for this is that you can close doors at both ends of the hallway, close all faculty office doors and some of the lab doors, and there are no windows. We used to go down into the basement, but there are lots of windows in the stairwells. So really you want to avoid windows. Don't use the elevators unless you're assisting people with disabilities. And then if we do have a tornado, crouch down and cover your head. In the case of a fire, obviously we do need to evacuate the building. Never assume that a fire alarm is a false alarm. Always assume that there is a fire and that you need to evacuate the building. So you want to evacuate quickly and orderly by way of the nearest exit. So in some rooms there is information given about where the nearest exit is. If not, take a look around. If you're in a lab on a regular basis, if you're in a teaching lab on a regular basis, look around and work out what would the nearest exit be to you. Then there's a meeting place for biology, which is on the north side of the parking lot E. And so parking lot E is to the north of Ross Hall. So if you look at Ross and you look at McKee, there's a parking lot to the north side of both of those buildings. So we're going to meet there on the north side of that parking lot. There's a big tree that most people will meet under. So in case of a fire, that's really where you want to try and head. Although, of course, leave the building by the nearest exit and then make your way to the meeting place. So the chemical hygiene plan also contains information about the emergency response plan. So please make sure that you have read this document and know this information. Okay, so in order to complete training, you now need to take a quiz associated with this information. Please remember that until you complete the quiz, you're really not permitted to work in a faculty research lab or be a teaching assistant. And for this fall semester, we have a deadline of 9/18 for you to complete the quiz. You cannot access the quiz here because the information is not provided, but you will receive an email from Sarah Milam, or would have already received an email from Sarah Milam about the quiz. It's a Qualtrics quiz, which means you can do the quiz online. We will be grading the quiz this year, so you're required to receive an 80%. There's 10 questions. You're required to receive an 80% on that quiz. We will be notified by either somebody within the School of Biological Sciences if you do not meet that 80% mark, and then we will provide additional training. So if you have questions about safety, please make sure that you talk to your PI or the instructor associated with your course. Remember, Mark Thomas is your chemical hygiene officer, and you can always contact me at the information given on the slide. So Susan Keenan, susan.keenan@unco.edu, or 970-351-2510. Thanks.